no longer on the infield. We took a decision that we're going to reduce the number of bodies on the infield because then there's less risk of contact between anybody. Excuse me. From a staff point of view, it was put in that nobody initially was allowed on the track while there's vehicle movement. What we found was it was all great putting all this in place, but it was not practical. And the rules of HSE are reasonably practicable. So we've adapted it as we've moved on since 2019. And we're in a situation now where when there's at 99.9% of meetings, although it should be 100%, no race comes out on the track unless it's brought out by the control car. People think we're doing that just to be difficult or whatever. There's a legitimate reason for that. The reason that the race is brought out is because Tate Mildenhall here, okay? Pippa says, I need the cars out the pits. I need the room, whatever, okay? If we bring them on behind the pace car, bear in mind the drivers are not allowed to overtake it, okay? The pace car can bring them out onto the track to relieve the pits, but can keep control of the cars and stop them, say on turn 2, if there's debris being picked up on the back straight, or if it's a tarmac track that's all being cleaned up. So it allows us to continue to efficiently move the meeting on whilst keeping everything under control and keeping things safe. Okay? Now somebody said to me, well, they can overtake the pace car, and then, yeah, they could. That's why we have the process in. If we do, the driver gets punished for doing it. And the HSE is satisfied with that. We've got a protocol in place, but it allows us to turn the track round. But what I will say is, you cannot go on the track, anybody, without permission of the clerks of the course. And the only people who are allowed on the track within the vehicle movement area, other than the breakdown crews, if you're obviously lifting a car, if it's if it's a transit breakdown, are the clerks of the course. And even then, the clerks of the course need to keep on the infield side of the track. Not walking in between cars, as we used to years ago as part of it. You line up there as they're walking past you. Once the track's been made safe and the cars are stationary, if a clerk has to go in between the lines of cars, they can do. But the other side of this is, if we're dealing with an incident, the one thing that we need to make sure that nobody does is you make sure that you do never put yourself between the car and the fence. Whether it's Armco fence, plate fence, post and wire in the case of yarn. You never put yourself between the car and the safety fence. Because if that car moves for whatever reason, or the breakdowns have hooked it up and don't know that you're there, or they've started to pull the car and the car drifts, because in the case of a banger, it could have been Bernarden, or there could be a piece of angle iron sticking out on a stock car. It really doesn't bear thinking about, does it, what could happen between you, car, you, fence. What's the soft bit? It's you. Okay? Please don't put yourself between a car and the fence. Okay? Same thing as well. If you're on a post and wire track, okay, we all know the only one that we've got now in our family is Yarmouth. But when the racing's on, if the table is the cable, should you be here? No. Where should you be? On the dog track. On the dog track. And you shouldn't be anywhere closer than that. Why? Because post and wire fences flex. That's what they're designed to do. They work very efficiently. But we had an incident many, many years ago now at Yarmouth where the marshal wasn't stood on the dog track. Superstock gets followed in. Marshall got launched. And I mean launched. The video is quite disturbing to watch. Okay? Why was that? Because he was standing where he shouldn't be. Now, back in the day, you'd blame him. But life's moved on since then. We're all responsible for each other. The clerk of the course is responsible for making sure that the marshals are stood where they should be. But in the case of a post and wire track, you stand back from the fence. Same thing as well, if post and wire tracks require more maintenance, when you're working on when you're having to work on it, if the cable's gone slack or anything like that, and you're working on the fence, and we're working all together as a team, you don't stand where if the rope was to break, the rope can ricochet back. Because trust me, we all know how thick those cables are. When they're under tension, if that snaps, it's not going to hurt, it's going to take your leg off. True?
I haven't tried it, but yeah.
Yeah. It genuinely, people don't realise how much tension the cables are under. They're designed that way, is to keep the cars in. But don't put yourself in an area where if the cable was to give, it can make contact with you. Because trust me, you're not going to come off the better side of it. All staff, anybody, as we said earlier on, who goes outside of the fence has got to have a high vis on, which comes on to photographers. We're going to pick on photographers next. Got a couple of new photographers in today who are joining the team, who Matt are going to look after for me. Nothing's changed as far as photographers go within the ORC. We've still all agreed that there can be 4 out on the infield at any one time, but they have to be escorted on and off the track once permission is given by the clerk of the course, and they're to go from the closest point from outside onto the track. 99.9% of the time, again, that's pick gate. Or in the case of Eastbourne, we've got the gate on the home straight, or Northampton on the current home straight, but they need permission to come across, and they have to be escorted across as well. They're not allowed to wander around on their own. They are not allowed on the track at any time in between the races, during a race, with the exception of if, for example, Speed Weekend, a separate risk assessment's been written for it because we're doing a grand parade or whatever, and everybody will be notified of it. But the general rule of thumb is they're not allowed on the track whatsoever. It's straight to the infield. And again, Matt, where do you stand? 2 and 4. Same as everybody else. Right, we're going to come on to sponsors. Our policy for the last couple of years has simply been there ain't any. No sponsors allowed on the track. That's it. No ifs, no buts, no buts. As we've moved on and we've learned and we've progressed things, we've looked to bring it back. We'll bring it back in a safe way because it is a key part to Speed Weekend and like National Bandy World Final when the winner's family want to go out and celebrate. And we lost that because we had to point blank as an immediate reaction to satisfy the Section 28, go no. But as we've moved on and we found that we can do it safely, this is the current new procedure that we've got moving forward at sponsors. Nobody who's not authorised as an official or a medic or a photographer is permitted on the track. That still stands as a general rule. Okay, with the exception of if the safety officer or the promoter has notified the steward that we have a sponsor and they're going to do this presentation. Nobody other than the promoter or the safety officer is allowed to grant that permission. So, for example, if Mel comes to Alex and says, I've got little Joey who wants to present the trophies for the Formula 2 final. Can Alex take Mel's word for it? No. If I go to Alex as the steward and go, little Joey's going to present the Formula 2 final, can that happen?
Yeah.
Yes, providing these following conditions are met. Any sponsor who is going to go out on the track, okay, has to have signed in. There is a track sign-on sheet, which the photographers do. They would have to sign on that as well. Most of this year, it's going to be me or Gavin. Or Krista, if Krista's here, if Ipswich isn't on. Because it milled and all in Ipswich.
Yeah,
Right?
I saw the three names in there, and then we have one to do it.
Don't let me think. Because I've just done it now, I've lost the trail of thought. That's why I said sure.
Sure. I'll put the question down.
Signing on the track.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have to sign on the track sheet. The safety officer will tell the steward who it is and the clerk of the course and when they're going to go and do it. It's the safety officer's responsibility then to make sure they've signed in and they're waiting at the pit gate if that's where we've decided that they're going to come on the track. The clerk and the steward will notify everybody else about it on radio. The sponsors do not have to have a high vis. And the reason that they don't is because when we're ready to bring them out onto the track, there is no vehicle movement permitted whatsoever. That includes the pace car, recovery trucks, tractors, nothing is allowed to move. Until the sponsor's been escorted by the clerk of the course, who will take over from the safety officer, to the presentation area, which will be on the infield, in a determined area which will be safe for them to be, while the track turnaround continued if necessary. Even at Ainsworth. Okay. At the end of the presentation, when we're ready to bring the sponsors back off, the process is reversed. Everything will have to come to a stop, nothing can move. They're escorted off. Once they're clear of pit lane and out of the way, we carry on as normal. I'd like to point out, this is not going to be a go back to, we've got little Joey every bloody meeting who wants to present a trophy. This will only be, for example, Speed Weekend, National Bang of War Final, the European Weekend, when we could have what I would call legitimate sponsors to do it. Okay? Not for matey who wants his kid to present a trophy. The answer's still no. Okay? One exception to the rule is, say for example, Speed Weekend, National Banger World, we do separate risk assessments and scripts which track staff receive. Anything that's been organised in advance, you'll be notified of at a staff briefing. Okay? But sometimes things do have to be tweaked, but we can do that so long as we've risk assessed it. Okay? Risk assessments are not set in stone. They can be changed to suit, so long as it's still done in a reasonably practicable, there's them two words again, manner that is safe to do so. Okay. The meeting progression, we've done that on and off the track rolls. Again, the communication between the two sides. Mark's not going to tell us anymore the car's ready when it's still on the IAB lorry. Jacko's not going to talk over everybody at Yarmouth when we can't see the pit gate. But all joking aside, listen to each other. Because the way it all works is when we're all working as a team, and subconsciously we're always doing that. But sometimes it does go a bit awry because people aren't listening to each other. Yeah. Okay. I said about there's a new risk assessment. is a new risk assessment now for the pace car. Why is there now a risk assessment for the pace car? I'll tell you why there's now a risk assessment for the pace car, because it's another element of where something could potentially go wrong. It could get hit. Archie could go the wrong way because he's forgotten what's behind him. Normally at the start of a meeting when he's used to turning left, but he's got super stocks this time. Yeah. But they're part of the show, but they're there for a safety reason as well. So they're now brought into the risk assessments as part of our protocols for keeping the meeting flowing, but in a safe manner. But there's something else that's attached to these pace cars now that is a potential hazard. I'll call them cages. Pace cars have had them for 50 years on the boots, or in the case of the pickups, on the back of the pickups. Can they cause a hazard? Yes, they can. We identified one a few years ago at Aldershot, got the ninja carts in the back. The kids, my height, before anybody says it, and the bar on the cage is here. But what stops that kid falling out the back? Well, they're the start marshals in the back. Nothing. So what did we do? We had the second bar put on halfway down the cage, which is why they've got those bars on there. We identified that as a potential problem, so we adapted to it. There's now a limit on the number of bodies that you can put. This is not when Mel's murdered anybody, but the number of bodies in the back of the pace car. Okay? If it's one of the saloons, i.e. the Mercs, the Audi, it is a maximum of 4 people in the back. If it's one of the pickups, it's 10. Okay? No more.
No one light on the front though.
Yeah. I needed to have it. Nobody is allowed to ride on the bonnets. That includes the start marshals, that includes the pace, trophy girls, nobody. And if we're at, for example, speed weekend, and we're starting out the back of them, you must make sure that you've got the harness on as the start marshal. Lynn has the same view on it as I do, but that's what we have to do now. Okay? That's all part and parcel of it as well. The pace car, as I said now, has a checklist. That also has to be completed and handed to the steward. Very to what the recovery one is, it does it have a push bar fitted on it? Although in the case of poor Mick at Aldershot, he might as well have done when he hit the market on us. But again, just complete it, make sure it's gone into the steward, and again, we've then got a record for the car. Somebody said to me, why do you have to do that when most of the pace cars anyway are road legal? So the reason that we have to do that now is when they go out on that track, whatever legal requirements they're meant to have go out the window. Okay? That's why they've also now got their own risk assessment. Okay. Yeah. Last thing as well, before we move on to the next bit of it. Anybody driving a vehicle on company premises, be it tractors, breakdown trucks, pace car, in the case of Hensford, what we call the panic wagon, the cutting van at Ipswich, you must be at least 18 and hold a full driving license. Okay? You're not allowed to drive them. In the case of, if it's a transit breakdown, you can be the wincher, but you cannot drive them. Okay? If you do, and you have an accident, I'll see you sitting next to me in court. You mustn't drive them if you haven't got a full license, please. Okay? The other thing while we're just on that, winchers. Who does winching on the breakdown Are you allowed on the back of the breakdown when it's moving? Right answer. Because, again, we're not naming tracks. It's none of the tracks in our family, but it was done a couple of months ago. Do not ride on the back of the breakdowns when they're moving. You fall off it, you're not covered. You're not insured. Because the paperwork says that you shouldn't be there in the first place. Again, I don't think we have an issue with that. I think we're all pretty solid on that. Okay. The ORC rules of racing. Rules of racing haven't changed. They're still remaining as they are. We're keeping with red flags to stop bangers, yellow flags for every other formula. All formulas other than bangers are now required to have the race levers, which they have, and they're all on transponders now as well, just to give Mel even more work to do. Or Steph, whoever's doing transponders on a meeting. One rule that confuses everybody, it still seems to be confusing certain people. Not so much track, but clerk of the court, track marshal, but clerks of the court. If we have to stop a race now, pace car comes out, picks up the leader. If there's any back markers within the first 6 cars, they're sent round to the back. In the case of a formula that's not bangers, that means that they gain a lap back. And especially for transponder operators, this has caused a bit of an headache this year. Okay, if it's bangers, they gain all the laps back. Okay, they're back at the back of the last cars on the lead lap. Just to make sure, clarify that to some people. All right, it could have made a massive difference at the National Banger World a couple of years back, couldn't it?
Yeah.
It could have done. It's a rule that was brought in to try and speed up lining things up, but also try and prevent make life easier for the manual scorers. Because who in here does lap scoring? Mel. Take my word for it. Lap scoring is one of them jobs you either can do it or you can't do it. Okay, it's a very hard job to do. Okay, it's a very hard job to do, but no lap scorer could get 40 bangers in one lap round here. It's not possible. So the rule was brought in to try and make it easier for lining the cars up for the lap scores, and it works. Makes it even more complicated when it's a figure of 8 at Yarmouth, but it does work. Okay. The ORC checklists, spoken about them already. The stewards, the safety officers, the clerk of the course and the pit marshal. Please make sure that you are completing them. Before anybody turns around and says to me, from this point of view this year, the pit marshal one still has all the 5 mile an hour signs upon them. Yes, they are. The ORC are creating new forms which we should have for the beginning of the season, but we've ran the current ones off just to be on the safe side because this is the ORC we're talking about. Okay, so please make sure again they're done. Can't re-emphasise again enough the importance of the paperwork now. Okay. The emergency procedures. There's actually 2 types of emergency procedures. We've got the on-track and then we've got the stadium one. And we're going to do the on-track one first of all. We have procedures and it's in the paperwork, and again it's slightly different depending on which track you're at, which is why we said when you signed in, if you work at a track, take 1 per track for the books. If we have to cut a driver out of a car because they require medical attention or that way, shape or form, we've got a procedure in place to do it. First of all, obviously the race has been stopped. Track's been brought under control. Clerk of the course has gone over, called the medics. The minute that the medics arrive, they are in charge. It doesn't matter what any of us say, they are in charge. The paramedic is in charge. Doesn't matter that Alex is turning around and saying, if you don't hurry up, I'm going to miss me dinner. If they take an hour, it takes an hour. Okay, but they're in charge, and the reason being is because it's patient care, and that becomes the priority. The time of the event, all this sort of stuff becomes completely irrelevant. If the paramedic decides, right, we want the roof off the car, again, at all our tracks now, we've got cutting equipment. Most of the tracks, the cutting equipment is identical. Mildenhall is the exception to the rule at the moment. Okay, but the other tracks are all identical now. They've got hydraulic cutting jaws, manual pumps, and everything to go with them. The procedure is the clerk of the course is in charge of the cutting of the car, in agreement with the paramedic of where they're going to start. Generally, if it's a banger, for example, we do the A post nearest the driver first, so we can get out the way then of the paramedics to carry on cutting the car. You then do the B post, the A post on the front, then the two B posts, and then the roof will go back. Sometimes though, the paramedics might say start the other side if they're already starting to treat the patient. It has to be a fluid, dynamic decision because every situation is different. Or in the case of here, you had a Formula 2, there isn't a driver side, passenger side because they're sat in the middle of the car. But if the paramedic says cut that bit first, then do that, then that's what we do. We just work with them. It's the clerk of the course's responsibility to cut the car with the assistance of the marshals, because the hydraulics require a couple of marshals on the pumps. And then the other thing we should have is a marshal there with a fire extinguisher, because you never know. You never know. You don't need anybody else around unless the clerk of the course asks for it, because what you tend to find is everybody loves a drama. And when they see everybody pile around an incident, they think, oh my God. Yeah, and there's one sign that we never want you to do, okay? And that's that one. The worst thing you can do in a public environment is that. Okay, because next thing you know, it won't even take 20 seconds and it'll be on Facebook, drivers died at Mildenhall. Right? We have a sign to the paramedics if, for whatever reason, the radio communication has gone down, to let them know we need them and we've got a potential problem with the driver. And that is the traditional one, crossed arms above the head. If the clerk does that, the paramedics know we need them. Okay? That's the backup for if the radio network went down. Once we've took the roof off the car, the paramedics will do whatever they need to do with the patient, and we just assist however they require us to. One thing that people always ask on a race day, the drivers, family, mechanics or whatever, once they're out, they've gone off the track, can we have the car back? No. Until the paramedics release that driver, that car belongs to us. It doesn't matter if it's at Ipswich and it's a 60 grand national hot rod owned by Rob McDonald. That 60 grand national hot rod is no longer owned by Rob McDonald. It is the property of Speedway. It's ours. Doesn't matter how much the family jump up and down, scream and shout about it, it's ours. Until we're given permission by the paramedics to release the car. And the reason for that is because if an investigation happens because the driver dies, that car is evidence. And it's evidence to support us and the investigation that the police and the HSE will inevitably come and do. If the paramedic says, oh yeah, he's broken his arm, we're sending him to hospital, but there's no threat to his life, he can have the car back, it can go. Each track again has an area where we would keep the car. Prime example, here, it would go in one of the barns. If it's at Hensford, it would stay on the infield in the Arncow Square. In the case, excuse me, of Eastbourne, it would go in the Speedway pub. But again, it all gets determined on the day. Ipswich, it would go in the barn as well. But we also keep them out of public touching, shall we say. I suppose is the best way of putting that. And again, all the details of that and where the cutting equipment should be kept and everything is all within the book, because again, at each track it's kept in different places. For logistical reasons, because again, every track is different. In the case of here, there's a designated van for it. Same with Ipswich. Aldershot is kept on the infield. Yarmouth, it's kept in the control car. Hensford, it's kept in the panic wagon. But they're all different. So again, it's detailed in the paperwork where it is. And again, it's the clerk of the course's responsibility to know it and check it. Okay? If you're a clerk in the room, make sure you check it. The last thing that any of us want is to be in a situation where potentially you could be life-threatening situation to the driver. You go with the hydraulics and it don't work. Okay? Check them. Every meeting, check them. It takes 5 minutes to check it before the start, please. Okay. Emergency procedures in the spectator area. That's not worded wrong, but there is now a bigger cover of all of this. We have an emergency code, which is K10. What does K10 mean? It doesn't mean anything. So why do we use it? We use the code K10 because that code can be put over the radio, over the PA system, and nobody other than staff know what it means. So everybody who's staff knows we've got an emergency, but it doesn't cause panic because the public ain't got a clue what's going on. And that's exactly what we actually want. Because the worst thing you can do in an emergency situation is cause panic. Because all that does is make it worse. Okay? The K10 code, what does it mean? K10 is our company code for if there is a threat to life. Car rolling over on the track is not a K10 situation. That's racing. That's dealt with under the ORC rules of racing. A member of the public getting stung by a wasp is not a K10 situation. Okay? The fact that one of the drivers in the pits has whacked himself on the thumb with a hammer is not K10. K10 is a genuine threat to life, i.e., if there was a bomb threat, or if there was a fire that had gone beyond control, or if there is a death. I'll give you an example of last season we had a K10 incident at Aldershot. Anybody know who John Dodge is? Younger ones may not know who he is. Okay, normal race meeting at Aldershot. Race meeting's going on. Everything's going swell, fantastic. Next thing we know, Mark, who was our pit marshal that day, not our Mark at the back, okay, radios me, where are you? At the time, I was up by the main gate entrance. He says, you need to come down into the pits. We've got somebody collapsed. Okay, off we go. At the same token, to be fair, he's also radio, we need medical help in the pits. Go down, there is John on the ground having a heart attack. So, straight away, to be fair to some people who were there who had got to help him as the paramedics arrived, it's obvious this could go the wrong way. So the K10 code is called on the radio by me. K10 in the pits, we need to stop. Bear in mind, we've just finished a race. Okay, racing has just finished on the track. If K10 is called during a race, the steward has to stop the race immediately. Doesn't matter if there's only 2 laps left to go or anything like that, it stops immediately. From everybody's point of view in here, all we need you to do if the K10 code is called is stop what you're doing and listen and wait for instruction. Okay? And the reason why we say that is there is only the one person in charge in a K10 situation, and that's the safety officer. And the reason for that is because the safety officers know the emergency codes, the venues, the logistics, and also the contacts that we need to make, not just to the emergency services, but to the HSE if necessary. Okay? So the safety officer is in charge. If the K10 code has been called and the safety officer is not at that location, they need telling to go there. When they're there, they take charge of it. So what happened with John is I've got to it, the K10 code has been called, the paramedics are working on John to try to start saving him. They decide we need counting him. Now, the medics that we have at the events are all covered. They've got everything they need to do what they need to do to save somebody. But there's only so much practically you can do at a track. You do need to go to hospital with something like that. It's a fact. Okay? So they decide that they want counting him. It's my job as a safety officer to call counting, relay the information, the venue, postcode, nowadays as well, there's the 3 words as well that they'll ask for. Again, all of that, that's down to me to do as a safety officer on that day. What do I need everybody else to be doing while we're doing with this? Absolutely nothing. I need you just to stop wherever you are at the moment. County's called, right, we're going to come in. We'll come in, blah, 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 blah. Tell them which way that they need to come in. The next thing we do is we deploy the control car to the entrance that we want the emergency services to come in through, because all our roadways are kept clear. And during K10, it needs to stay that way. Couple of our venues, we have inside parking. Aldershot, Ensford, nothing's allowed to move. And the staff, that's where you guys come in. What we did at Aldershot was said, right, we've got emergency services coming in, they're going to come down Claycourt Road and they're going to come in for the pit gate entrance. So we need to make sure that the pit gate entrance is clear up to where the incident is, and also that the roads outside leading up to it are clear. So off goes the control car down to meet the ambulance. Track marshals are asked to come and help keep the roadways clear. Everybody did that. Perfect. Nothing moved. The paramedics there are still obviously working on John to stabilise him. In comes County. Straight in. Why? Because everybody had helped us do exactly what we need to do. Keep the roads clear, nothing can move, no breakdowns, no nothing. The race that was on the track had to stay on the track. Once we got County in, the decision was then made that while they're there with John, we can release the cars off the track. Boiling hot day. On that occasion, Paul Fury was the steward. Paul said, look, can we get the drivers out of the car? Yes, you can. Because again, the last thing we need is them dehydrating in red hot cars on the track. But at the minute we need everything to stop. Once County arrive, they are then in charge. Not 75% of the time, if you call County in, you normally get fire and police. That's standard procedures in this country. The fact that the police are there is nothing to worry about unless you're running on red diesel, and you shouldn't be. Okay? But it's all because it seems to be turning into a drama. There's nothing to start panicking about. That's standard procedure in this country when they react to an event. Again, we assist them in whatever they want to do. And I'm pleased to say that they took John away, and John's now back to health and was actually at Aldershot on Sunday. So that one turned out in a positive manner. But did we still have to do a paper trail for that? Yes, we did. We still had to notify the HSE because you have to do what's called a riddle report. A riddle report is the way of notifying the HSE that you've had an incident, an accident, or worse, a death. And that's when they can start their investigation on you. That one was nice and simple. Let them know, okay, send us your stuff, this is what happened, box tick, job done. Why? Because all the paperwork again was in place. Work to dream. One of the key people in a K10 situation, other than the safety officer, is the steward. Because the steward has still got control of the track, which may have to be used for certain situations. 18 months ago, the Hemsford firework event, we weren't even one race in. We had an accident with a driver on the track, cut the roof off, decisions made, he needs to go to hospital. Well, they didn't want to transport him by ambulance because of the nature of his injuries, so we ended up with the air ambulance in. The air ambulances come in, they decide where they're going to land, and then you have to again adopt to that. In the case of Hensford, they land on the infield, on the West End infield, because it's flat, perfect to do it. Where would they land here? They wouldn't land on that infield. They have done, there you go. But in the case of, no, you wouldn't. For example, they sent the air ambulance to Aldershot for John. It wouldn't land on the infield. It tried, and it wouldn't. So they ended up landing in the arena over the road. But again, we just have to react to that and deal with them the best that we can. I've been harping on all day about paperwork and about doing things correctly. And this next bit is the reason why. If we have a K10 situation that goes wrong, it opens, in fact, I'm going to go back a second. There's one other person, because I've just spotted him at the back. Mr. Knowles. Nick plays a vital role in any K10 situation. Anybody think why? Eh? Correct. The worst thing that you can do with us as human beings is we're all nosy and we all want to know what's going on. And we all get the hump when we don't know what's going on. But there is a way of communicating information to the public. In the case of the John Dodge one at Aldershot, John Sharp was commentating that day, and all John did was let the crowd know that we got a situation going on which had had to result in the racing stopping. Once it's resolved, yeah, we'll give you more information. But every so often, John would just relay that. Because keeping the crowd calm is vitally important. Because if people start to panic and start to run, that's when crushes can happen, people can get hurt, and then you go from having one incident to possibly having several. So the commentator is key on keeping the people informed. But there is a way to do it, which again is in the book, because Nick shouting down the microphone, "He's dead!" He's not going to help anybody. Yeah. If Nick's going ooh and ah over the radio because the Caravan DD's going on, that's different. But other than that, Nick doesn't need to be shouting down the radio about a problem. But again, commentators play a key role in that, but they take their instructions from the steward. Don't take it upon yourself as a commentator to say things that might get you in trouble later on. Commentating, again, is another one of them jobs where you either, I think you can do it or you can't do it, depending on how much waffle you can talk like I am. You do a grand job, Nick. I'm not going to pick on you anymore. Okay. So, the last part of the K10 side of things. So, K10's called, everything stops. You don't do anything until you're asked to be involved in it. You may not need to be. But unfortunately, there's times when it's called because we don't get the outcome that we want. We got it with John. He got took away to hospital, he made the recovery. And unfortunately, it does hark back to the Birmingham situation again. I think those in the room who do know, who don't know, if you don't know, have you been hiding somewhere for the last 3 years? We had a gentleman killed at Birmingham, got run over by a tractor, squashed. Unfortunately, that night is a night that will never ever leave anybody who was there or involved in it. Okay? That night, when that happened, again, we had to call county in, call the police in, call the HSE. If something like that happens, the venue becomes a crime scene, which has a whole new world of legal ramifications to it. Okay? When the police arrived, the first thing that they wanted to know was, who's in charge? Where's your paperwork? And I'm not joking yet. They weren't bothered the fact that there is a body lying on the track. Who's in charge? Where's your paperwork? So, I had to take them to race control. There's the paperwork. Are you insured? Yes. All in there. You got your risk assessments? Yes. And I had to email it them there and then, because we have it electronically as well. Once they'd done that, they have got complete control of everything and everybody. Their helicopter came in and forensically photographed everything. When we went to the coroner's inquest, I'm not kidding you, the police report was 6 of those long. I will say, the police report actually was positive for us. It praised us on the way we dealt with the emergency situation. It praised our staff on how they conducted themselves with us having to evacuate the stadium, because again, we had to obviously evacuate the public calmly, without no grief. I'm not going to mention the one spectator by name who actually went to the turnstiles and demanded a refund because we cancelled the meeting. But that's the mentality of people that you're dealing with at times. Okay? But what the police report did go through, and again, I'll keep going on about it, this. When the HSE investigation started, the EHO literally went for the jugular with us. I want this, and this. You have 24 hours to produce it, and I want it for the last 5 years. Dean turns round and, of course, to me, please tell me we've got it. Yes, Dean. We have. We have our paper trails. We have our checklists. They wanted to see the last 5 years worth of ORC checklists, staff sign-on sheets. Why would they want that? I'll tell you why they want it. Because they are trying to build a case to say they don't know what they're doing. This has happened because they're negligent and they haven't got procedures and they don't know what they're doing. And part of our biggest battle with it was that we could turn around and go, we do have procedures. Were the procedures right? No procedure is 100% right because life changes. That's why paperwork changes. But we had procedures. I'm pleased to say all the checklists, right? And for 5 years at Birmingham, that was 150 race meetings worth of paperwork that we used to do 30 meetings a year. Right? 150 meetings worth of paperwork we had to produce to him. And I'm pleased to say, again, because of the staff and everybody doing what we asked, every single one of those pieces of paperwork was correct. But it also proved that we have consistency. For example, if I was to divert it just to Inter-Race for a second, Colin Richardson, some people may know who he is, may not. Colin is our steward. Colin stewarded Birmingham week in, week out. Phil Minchak, part of the course, week in, week out. Pit marshal, changed quite frequently. Is that a problem? No. Why should it be? Because we all know what the procedures are. But the point that I'm getting at with it is the people who were signed on all then got interviewed. Every single person that was signed on for that event, from me down to Heidi, who was purely there as a turnstile operator, taking money, giving the tickets, absolutely nothing to do with what had happened, got interviewed. And turned around and said, how long have you worked for the company? Do they do this? What do they do if that happens? Some of the questions, Heidi turned around and went, there's nothing to do with me. And sometimes that's the best answer you can give, because they're looking for you to dig a hole. HSE at Ipswich, favourite people. Okay? When we had the situation at Ipswich go on, okay, and then they're trying the prosecution against us, Krista won, right? But when it finishes, don't become complacent and think it finishes there. 2 weeks after it got throughout the court case, she did an on-the-spot inspection, didn't she? Turned up unannounced, which they're allowed to do, to Krista, come to inspect you. Which is why we've got to be on it as much as we can. Yeah, I think Krista was hoping somebody had poisoned her, but it did nothing. Yeah, but just to finish it off the seriousness of it, okay? It's something that consumed 3 years of my life, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. To be told potentially you could go to prison, to have to stand in a dock. I don't know if anybody here has gone to prison. Nothing to do with us if you have, or if you've had to go and stand up in a courtroom. If you didn't find it terrifying, you're a bigger man or a lady than I am. Okay? But you're not just there being quizzed by the judge. You've got barristers there, you name it. It's something that you don't want to have to be involved in. And the way of not being involved in it, stick to keeping everything as safe as you can and doing your job. And then it all works perfectly, like it does week in, week out. This is a one-off. But the one-offs are the ones that can hurt you. What it also means is we have a duty of care as a company to each and every one of you. We have a duty of care to the drivers and the drivers and the public, yes. But we have a duty of care to you as well. And we're aware that sometimes there's situations that people can't deal with. That night at Birmingham was one of them. I had 3 members of staff who couldn't deal with what was going on. That's fair enough. We're not going to shout at you because you can't help do this and do that. My answer to them on the night was, look, just head off the track, just go and have a cup of tea, just go and chill out, and I'll come and see you once I've dealt with what we were dealing with at the time. Not being able to deal with something dramatic like that does not make you weak, doesn't make you any less within the team. Some people genuinely can't deal with it, and until it's thrown in your face, you don't really know if you can or you can't. But after it had all happened, we have a duty of care to make sure that psychologically, physically, or whatever, you're all right. Those 3 members of staff, well, we offered it to everybody, but the 3 of them took us up on it, was for the aftercare. Yeah. The 1 member of staff in particular took it very bad. Yeah, they needed to go to therapy to be able to deal with it. Coming to us with stuff like that, that's what we're here for. You can come and talk to us about anything in confidence. Because we have, I keep saying, that duty of care to make sure you're all right. Because there are situations that can arise which are frightening. It's frightening to deal with sometimes. Luckily, most of the time, 99.9% of the time, we turn up, we have a laugh, we have good racing, we go home. But that 0.1% of the time is where we kick in. But it's not just on the day, it's also after, you know. So please don't think that you're on your own. If in any, not just in that, but in any situation, you've had a crap meeting, you want somebody to talk to, pick up the phone if it's not on the day. We're there if you want to talk to us. I know nobody wants to talk to me. I'm a miserable bastard. Yeah, but yeah. But ring Krista, or ring Krista, ring Gavin. If you don't feel that you can talk to us initially about it, or but for example you feel that you could speak to Lynn, speak to Lynn. Lynn will then come and talk to us. Yeah, because she knows I have to listen to her, otherwise she doesn't go on. But the key point that I'm trying to get to is, stock car racing is a sport that we all love. If we didn't love it, you wouldn't be sat in this room listening to me bore you for a day. Okay? But we have to conduct it in a safe manner. And this is what today's been about. Okay? Not teaching anybody to suck eggs, but make sure that you're not just protecting the company, you're protecting yourself. Okay? If you get hurt, you're no use to anybody. Plus, nobody wants to be in a situation where your life long term could be affected because of some silly mistake that you've made on a race day. It goes into that thing that they always turn around and say to kids and whatever. If you're not sure, don't do it. Because we want you to keep coming. We want you to enjoy working with us. We want you to come, have a laugh, abuse Mel because she enjoys it. Yeah. But at the same token, enjoy it and go home at the end of the meeting. You know, you may be knackered, covered in mud if it's the case of here or Northampton, but or dust. But go home having a good day. And the key way of doing that is if we all work together. I think across our family of tracks we have a bloody good team of people. I think everybody helps each other out, and we need to continue that. Because that way we will continue to be the best in the business. Yeah, we'll continue to be the best in the business. We'll continue to lead the way. And you guys make Speedworth, Incherace, Mildenhall, whatever you want to call it, what it is. And without you all, we can't do it. So, oh, well, Peg, you know, we couldn't do it without you.
Best actor Oscar. I think one thing we also need to mention is when the investigation happens, anyone that's involved that's taken a role, there will generally, potentially always be a private prosecution, won't there? And the ORC Health and Safety meeting that Adam and I went to, we need to make sure that we might have to get photographers involved, but on senior staff side, we need to make sure we keep our notes and everything else, because they have 3 years to bring a prosecution after an incident. So they could come to us 2 years, 300 days after and go, we're going after you for an incident that took place at Mildenhall on that day. So we need to make sure we've kept all that information, because I know that I won't remember it 3 years down the road. And if you don't remember it, then that opens up everything for prosecution. The other thing that they mentioned, and I haven't mentioned it, there are currently 4 private prosecutions taking place against the ORC.
And each one of those 4 that's currently going on at the moment is for people being hit by moving recovery vehicles. Why is it happening? Is it because the breakdown drivers are not being careful? Or is it because certain tracks are not adhering to the policies that they're meant to adhere to? I can't say. But the way that you prevent yourself being in that position is exactly what we've just turned around and said. Make sure you're doing a good job, make sure you're doing it right, and everything works harmoniously. I've said it. Right. Everybody will be pleased to know that's pretty much it. Yeah, go on before we do the last bit.
Yeah. Just to summarise all that, thank you for Adam for doing all that, because it's been, it's a lot of information to take in, okay, and he's had to serve the chips, so he's had a lot to do. So you picked up your books, okay. Whatever position or what role you played in the company, it'd be pit marshal, race marshal, scrutineer, recovery. There's a section at the back, and it's quite specific for the role which you do. We don't expect you to remember all this. We don't all the risk assessments. You're not going to word for word, but just take some time. There are some new guys joining the team this year. Anyway, just concentrate on that bit as well before you start any season. Even though you might have been doing it for the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, still read it again, because it does get updated every year, mostly. Okay. So go to the back and just for your own peace of mind, just your race marshal certainly, just read that just every year, at the start of the year, and that will give you more information what you might think, because sometimes you think, there's nothing beats on the spot training. We teach you by being on the track or doing or whatever, But always read that as well, because that will give you, you know, and if you've got any questions from it, that's where you can come to us as well. Okay. Yeah. Other than that, that is me.
Okay. I have some good news for some people and I have some bad news for others. The good news is, if you have completed an ORC exam previously, you don't have to do one today. The bad news is if you haven't, and nobody can sneak out the door because I'll check the records when I compile everything. And again, it's a part of the insurance that you do one. You need to do one before you leave. We'll sort that with you when you sign out. A bit more bad news for everybody is the ORC are producing the new ones at long last. And when they come, the plan is they will be online, which will be electronic marked. So there can be no cheating. So, Pippa's,
We're doing tests, so we don't work.
right, last couple of things, everybody. This is the bit where I go and hide under the table. Somebody duct tape Pippa, please. Somebody duct